Hi. Hi. So in this session, let us look at the join function and some function from the random library. Uh, See, suppose you have a list as specified as we can see over here. So we have a random list. We have a general list named as list one. It consists of three elements A, B, and C. Now, if you try to print this list, let me just go to my Spider console. Yeah. So let me print list one. So I get the list as it is. I can see the elements which are there in the list A, B, C. Let me increase the font size so that becomes visible. Yeah. So the list and the elements that are there. Now there could be various situations wherein you want the different elements which are there in a list to be printed as merged together. So in such cases, what we can use, we can make use of the join function. The basic syntax for the join function, it has the separator is the variable A that you see is for the separator, and here inside the join function in the round brackets, the elements from the list which you want to join. So the name of the list has to be specified. Now A over here, it could be any separator such as blank space, a hyphen, a dash, or an exclamatory mark or something else. So basically the function of the separator, which is indicated by this variable A over here, is to take each element of the list one and then join them to each other with the help of the separator which is specified in A. So let me demonstrate this function. So suppose I define A as hash. Now what I'm intending to do is I need to join all these elements of list one, which means I need to join A, B, and C to each other, and these elements should be separated by hash. So I create one variable B. Now B is equal to A dot join and list one. What we are doing here is that the separator that you want, that is the separator in between these elements, is specified in A, and the elements from which you want to join, that is the list from which the elements of the list from which you want to join. Those that list I have specified here. And now when I print B, I can see in the output here that each element of the list one have been joined to each other, separated by the separator which I have specified in variable A. Correct? So instead of hash, let us say I have an exclamation mark. I have a double exclamation mark. Now what is going to happen? The first element of list one will be called the separator. Double exclamation marks will be added. The second element of the list one will be called the separator. Double exclamatory marks will be added, and then the third element would be called, they would all be joined to each other, as can be demonstrated when I run this command over here. Now suppose instead of this marks, if I have a text, let us say color. Now what is going to happen when I join? I get A color, which was the separator, B color separator, C. So I hope you are getting what we do here. A, B, and C were the elements of list one. They have been joined to each other by the separator. In this case, the separator was a string or a text, and the text was color. Now, if I do not want any separator, then what I can do over here is that I can just put that as empty. And now when I run this, I get A, B, C. They are all fused to each other. They are joined to each other. I hope it is very clear how this join function works. Now, it is not necessary that you specify the separator separately. Here, what you can do is, you here itself we can directly specify the separator. So if I don't want any separator, or I want an empty, I don't want any, I want blank. So what I do, I specify the separator as empty dot, the function is join, and the elements from the list which I want to join is specified. So this is because the elements are there in list one. List one is specified here. So each elements from list one will be called. They would be joined to each other by the separator which is here. The separator in this case is empty, and it would be stored in variable B. And finally, I am printing out the value which is there in B. And when I run this, I get the same output A, B, C. Here, if I want the separator to be say a hyphen or a dash. So now when I run, what I'm going to do is, what I get A, B, C. So what we mean is this, taking the form of A, declaring A is not necessary. Directly here itself, we can specify the separator that you want, and you get the same output. We will now look at the random library. Now, where do you encounter a random library? We see many of you are playing, there could be situations where you want to simulate a data set. So you want this data set to be generated randomly. Or let us say when you play games, so the obstacles which you encounter in a game, let's say you're playing a racing car, a game of a racing car, or you're playing some bike riding games. So you find various obstacles, various cars that come in between. Now these are all randomly placed. Every time you play the game, the position, the speed at which they are placed, they are all randomly arranged. They are not at the same, because if they are fixed, then there's no fun in playing that game. That randomness in that position, the randomness in the occurrence of these elements is what adds to the fun of the entire game. So to generate random functions, Python has a random library. From random library, there are various functions which help you to generate various random values. We are going to look at specifically 5 different functions. The first function that we're going to look at is the random function. This random function, it helps to generate a decimal number between 0 and 1. Rand in function, it helps to generate a random integer between the values that you specify in A and B. What does dot choice function do? The choice function, it basically does, let us say you have a list consisting of 10, 12, 100 elements, and if you want one element randomly selected from that list, then you can use the choice function. And the sample function that we have, let us say from a list, if you want 3 elements randomly selected, 4 elements randomly selected, then we can use the sample function. And in case you want to create a sequence, and from that particular sequence you want an integer or element that is randomly selected, then we can use the randrange function. The starting element from the sequence is specified here, the end element plus 1. This is how we specify the end value. And the step, what we're trying to say is, say for example, if I specify the start as 3 and I specify here the next value as say 12, and I specify the step as 12, what will happen is Python will initially create a list beginning from 3 and separated by steps of 2. So my first element will be 3, second element will be 3 plus 2, which makes it 5. The third element will be 5 plus 2, which makes it 7. The next element would be 7 plus 2, which is 9. Then we go on to 11, and then the next element would be 11 plus 2, which is, so what happens generally over here, remember this value which is specified, there's always last value plus 1. So the last value plus 1, which is, that is the, where is the list actually going to stop? So that is, the list will stop now, not at 12, it will stop at 11. So I get this particular equation, I get this particular sequence, and from this sequence, Python will randomly give you an integer. If I change the sequence, let us say I specify the start value as 1, and I specify the last value as say 10. And now I specify the interval as 3. Now what is going to happen? The sequence that is going to be generated would start from 1. The step is 3. So the next value will be 4. The next value will be 7. The next value would be, actually the value should be 7 plus 3, which is 10. But we know that the list does not stop at the value that you have specified as the n value. The list maximum stops at the n minus 1 value, which means the list is supposed to stop at 9. But because 10 is greater, because this value of 10 is greater than the last value of 9, you will not be getting 10, and the sequence stops. And from this 3 randomly generated sequence, Python will give you an integer. So that is how you can use the random integer. The difference between randrange and randint is, randint basically gives you an any randomly selected integer between A and B. In the meanwhile, randrange first creates a sequence according to the start n plus 1 value and the step that is specified. And from that particular sequence, it will give you a randomly selected integer. So let me demonstrate the working over of these functions that we just discussed. So now what we need is we will now need to call the random library. So import random. I will import an instance or an object of this library as, I'll create an object for this library as R. Now what I'm going to do, the first function R dot random. So let me just use the print function, print R dot random. Now when I execute my statement, I can get here built-in method of random object. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I need to put the round brackets. Now when I run this, I get a randomly created decimal number between 0 1. Let me run it once again. So I get a new random number between 0 and 1. I run it once again. I get another random value between 0 and 1. So it's just the best idea that I create a variable A, and I will, that is a randomly created value. I put this to A, and then I will print out the value of it. So why have I used R? Because this random function is defined in the random library, which has been, the object for the random library is R. So what I'm trying to do over here is that rather than always writing from random call the random function, because the random function has been renamed as R. The random library we have created an instance of the random library and called it R. So from R we are now calling the random function. I hope the function is clear. So the value that is created is being stored in A, and I am printing out the value of A. Now, instead of this, if I create, let us look at the second function, rand integer. So the starting value for the integer, let us say 1, and I want the integer, and I want say 3. Yeah. So I need a randomly selected integer between 1 and 3. So when I run this, I get 3. Remember the n+1 value which I specified is works for rand range and not for rand int. Here both one, that is the start value, and the end value is included. So you can get any value. It could be a start value, it could be an end value, or it could be any value between the start and the end that you specified. Now, because there are just 3 values which I have specified, that is, I need a randomly selected integer between 1 and 3. So when I run this, I got 1. When I rerun this code once again, now I got 2. When I run this code once again, I got 3. Now these are all randomly being prepared. So when I run this once again, I got 3. I hope this is clear. Now we will look at the choice function. Suppose you have a list now. List 1. List 1 consists of say different colors. So let me create a list. So consists of red, it consists of black, consists of green. Let me add one more element. It consists of white. So I have a list consisting of 4 elements: red, black, green, and white. The name of the list is list 1, or let me call this list as colors. Okay. So now what I want is, from this list, I want a randomly selected value. So from R, I will call the function choice. And which is the list from which I want the value that to be selected randomly? The name of the list is color. So I specify it over here. So what we basically do is, the choice function, what it does is, from the elements which are specified in colors, it will randomly give you one element. So, and that element in the space is going to be stored in A. And finally in line 5, I am printing out A. When I run this, so initially I got the value black, which was randomly selected from the list of colors. I run this once again, I got red from this list. I run this once again. Now I got green from this list. Now let us look at what does sample do. Suppose you don't want value, you want value, you want 2 values. So the syntax basically means the list from which you want the values, and the number of elements or the number of values which you want from that particular list, which I have specified in this particular case as 2. So those 2 elements would be now stored in A, and in line 5 I will print out A. So when I run this, I initially got a list of red and green. I run this once again, I now got a list of white and green. I now run this list, I got black and green. I run this list, I got green, red. Let me run it once again, I got black, green, green, white, red, white. Yeah. So what basically what we are trying to do is, because I have specified either C or the number of elements as 2, so I'm just randomly, Python is randomly selecting 2 values from the list and giving it as output. So we will now look at the rand range function. Rand range. Okay. Now let me just specify the start value as 1, the end value as n value should be 9. So in this case, because we know it is n value plus 1 which I need to mention, so 9 plus 1 should 10, and the step, let us say, is 4. So the sequence, remember the sequence that I get is, let me just show you what the sequence is. 1 plus 4 is 5, 5 plus 4 is 9. From these 3 values, I am going to get a value. Now this is not an executable statement because I have put a hash. I have made this as a comment. I'm using this just to demonstrate to you how this works. So now when I ran A, I got 5. I ran this, I got 5 once again. I got 1 once again. So remember what is happening in this particular case is, Python is creating a sequence from which it is randomly giving a value from that particular sequence. And I got 9 here in this case. So if I change these parameters, if I say 2, then remember what is my sequence? 1 start value is 1. So 1 plus 2 will be 3. 3 plus 2 will be 5. 5 plus 2 will be 7. And then 9. And when I run now, from this random sequence, I'm going to get a value. So now I got 1. I run this once again, I got 1. I run this once again, I got 5. I run this once again, I got 5. Let me run it once again. I get 7 now. I am running 1. I get 3, 1. So that is how this works. 7. Let me run it once again. I get the answer to be 3. Answer to be 7. I hope this understanding is very clear of how we can use random functions. Now what we will, to demonstrate the understanding that we have just acquired, we will now try to generate a simple random password generator. So many of you would be familiar with the cases wherein you forget your password. So the system actually gives you a trial or a randomly generated initial password which you need to change. So let's look at how we can create an application which generates a random password as initial start trial password, which the user can later on change. So we need to call the random library, import. Yeah, before we go that, we know what does random function do. the random function, it generates dot random function, it generates a random number between 0 and 1. The rand int function generates an integer between 0 and 1. What you want, a decimal number between, the rand int function specifies, it generates a random integer between the values that you specified. Now, what if you want a random value? So if you want a random decimal value between 10 and 100, let me just show you. Import random as r. Okay, yeah. So a is equal to r dot random. Let me demonstrate this once again, and then I will, in line 3, let me print the value of a. Now what happens is, what random function does, it generates a random decimal number between 0 and 1. What does the rand int function, sorry, what does the rand int function do? It gives me an integer between the values that you specified. In this case, it is just going to give an integer 4. I ran this once again. I got 5. I got 2. I got 7. Now, what if I want a decimal number between 1 and 9? So in that particular case, to this integer, randomly selected integer, I can add the decimal part. Decimal part is now from r dot random. We know this is always going to be between 0 and 1, right? So a random integer would be generated. To that, a random decimal number between 0 and 1 would be added. So I will basically get a decimal number between 1 and 9 in A, which I will print out in line 3. So now I'm getting 5 point the number. Let me run it once again. I'm getting 2. Now I can round also, right? So I can use a round function. So let me create another variable b. What is b equal to? I don't want, see, the number that I'm getting consists of many decimal places. So I just want a number consisting of 2 decimal places. So what I can do is I can round off a. So I can use the inbuilt function round, and from a, I specify the number which is to be rounded, and then I specify the number of decimal places which I want. So the number which is to be rounded is in a, and the number of decimal places which I want is 2. That new number, I can store it back in a, or I can store it another variable b, and I can print here. And finally, I can print the value which is there in B. So now I'm getting 3.06. I run this once again, I get 6.1. I run this once again, I got 7.29. So the number which was randomly generated in A, which is stored in A, is now being rounded up to the decimal numbers, and the resultant number we are printing out in. The number which is stored in A is being rounded up to 2 decimal numbers stored in B, and the value which is stored in B, I am printing out in line number. So 4.24. Let me run once again. I get 2.15. Now what we are going to do is, now let us create a random password generator. So what we know, a password generator, generally, what does a password consist of? A password consists of some small letters. It consists of capital letters. It consists of special characters. It also consists of digits. Now, how efficiently you use these combinations of all these will specify the strength of that particular password. Let us not go into too much of that complexity. Let us just develop a simple password generator. So what I now want is, I now need a list consisting of small letters, uppercase letters, digits, special characters, etc. For now, let us not focus on the special case characters. Let us say I need a password consisting of eight characters, and these 8 characters could be from a combination of digits, capital letters, and small letters. Now, for that particular aspect, I would first need a list consisting of all these small and capital letters and digits. Now, you can create a list by typing them. You can, create a list of all small letters, all capital letters, typing all small capital, and then you can to that you can add digits also, or in string library, which is another library in Python. All the small and uppercase letters, digits, special characters, all these are already defined. You have various functions which help you work with text. So why don't use a string? Why don't we use that directly? So I'm saying I import string as S. I'm just calling I am just creating an instance or object of the string library. Let me first show what happens. Yeah, okay. So I will now from string, what I want, if I want all small letters, so I can write ASCII underscore lower case, and then I can print it. So I have now got a collection. I made a spelling error. Yeah, lowercase. I have now got let me just move. I just made this correction. There's no round marks. There's no opening and closing round brackets here. So what now happens is, what does ASCII lowercase contain? It contains all small letters. So the collection of all these small letters is now stored in A. and then I am printing out A in line 5. If I want uppercase, then instead of lowercase, I just specify as uppercase and I get all capital letters. Now, if I want a combination of small and uppercase, I just use letters. So I use ASCII underscore letters. Okay. So I get a combination of small letters and then a combination of all capital letters. Now, let us say I want to this, I want digits. So I can write to this from string call digits. So basically now what I have, I created a sequence of small and uppercase letters, and to that sequence, I added another sequence of digits consisting of 0 to 9. Correct. Now what has happened is all these are that you can see this is now a sequence. Let us say I want to convert this into list. So I will just create, I can, use the keyword like how we have in all the exercises that we have seen how we can typecast a variable. That is, if you have if you have any value which is coming from the user, how do we convert that to an integer? How do we convert that to a decimal number by using float? Similarly, we can convert all the value which is in A. I can convert that into a list also. So for currently what has happened, the value which is in A, if you can look here in the variable explorer, so the data type is string, it consists of 62, the size is 62, and the elements or the values which are there, we can see it over here. So 26 small letters, 26 capital letters, and 10 digits, that is from 0 to 9. So the total becomes 26 plus 10, which is 62. So I want to convert this. I don't want this to be a string. I want this to convert this to a list. So I can just use the keyword list. I can say list1 is list at A. So what happens is the text type, which is A, the string which is stored in A would be converted to a list, and the new list would be stored in list1. So let me just print list1 to you and show. Yeah. So now what has happened is previously you see it was all string. Now it is converted to a list consisting of small letters, upper letters, and digits. Now from this list, I will randomly select 8 characters. So which is a function that I should use? The function we know we need to, from a given list, if you need 8 elements, then the function that you're going to use is sample. So I need to store that, let us say, in pass1. Okay? Pass1 is equal to, from which is a function from random library, call the sample function, and within the sample function, which is the list from which you want elements. So the list is list1, and how many elements you would want? I want 8. So what happens is from list1, 8 elements would be randomly selected, stored in pass1, and in line 7, let me just print out pass1. Now when I run this command once again, so I get a randomly selected list consisting of capital letters. It may consist of small letters, it may consist of digits. Now I am not making it that complex to ensure that it necessarily will consist of small, capital, and digits. So because I'm just using a simple function, it would be any randomly selected 8 characters or 8 elements from the list which I have highlighted. So it could be possible in some cases, because this is very simple, that in cases the password that you get may not consist of digits, may not consist of lowercase also. So if you want to specify, then accordingly you can modify the program and then incorporate them all. So now what has happened is when I'm printing them, I don't want them to be printed as a list. I want them to be printed as a string character. So what I can basically do is I can use the join function, correct? So what I will now use is, we have seen, I will say the final password should be in the variable password. So what is password? I want the elements which are there in pass1 to be joined to each other without any space. So I specify the separator as empty. Then I use the join function and the elements and the name of the list whose elements I need to join. Pass1. So what is going to happen is the 8 elements in pass1 would be joined to each other without any separator, and that would be stored in password. So finally, I will print out password. Now, when I run this function once again, I get a password consisting of small letters, capital letters, and digits. Now I get a new password. Let me run the code once again. I get now another password. So I hope this is very clear how we can use the random library. We can use the join function. So yeah, we will stop this recording for now here. We'll stop the session.